Greetings, everyone. Wayne Amelung here, representing Jesus Christ of history. Welcome to another day to live for Jesus. How the Gospels were written and assembled and preserved. Part 2. We begin with 3 texts that describe the numerous people documenting eyewitnesses' experiences. Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. John chapter 20, verses 30 through 31. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. John chapter 21, verses 24 through 25. This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now, there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself would not contain the books that would be written. Most Bibles divide up the Gospels by chapters of several or more subtitles of individual testimonies. This is how the Gospels were originally written, according to John chapter 21, verses 24 through 25. Before they were arranged and rearranged into the 4 official Gospels structured to the primary cultural groups, according to Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. 12-year-old young Jesus learned reading and writing skills from watching the Bible scholars at the yearly Passover feasts, according to Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 52. Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 through 10. Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. Luke chapter 5, verses 27 through 29. Matthew Levi was a Jewish tax collector working for the government, the Roman government, which made him a hated man and a traitor. There was a large group of fellow tax collectors who were invited by Matthew to join the growing group for dinner. Matthew was an outcast with a strong messianic curiosity and documentation skills, which is why he was picked by Jesus. Matthew's tax collector friends were not specifically picked by Jesus, but Matthew would have called on them for help documenting the rapidly increasingly large number of eyewitnesses in various cities. Matthew would have heard from Jesus about how Moses documented community events in the book of Numbers. Matthew would likewise document the events of Jesus' ministry in various cities. Jesus told his apostles to go to the Jews first with the gospel in Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 through 7. Matthew would have realized that his gospel of Matthew had to be written first. Matthew also realized from Jesus that the book of Chronicles omits many details that Samuel Kings includes. Matthew also realized from Jesus that he spoke to the Jews differently than he spoke to the Gentiles. So, Matthew and his fellow apostles slowly began to realize the need for different gospels for the different ethnic groups. Matthew and John were more skilled at reading and writing, but the others developed their skills from the two and from Jesus himself. Just as the Levitical priests developed their skills from Moses, then subsequent generations of individuals with strong righteous lifestyles also learned the skills of copying scriptures for their use in their communities. See Part 1 video. Sometime later, John Mark, who also wrote Mark's Gospel and had access to numerous eyewitnesses' reports, was a cousin to Barnabas, a Levite. Mark learned his reading and writing skills from his scholarly uncle. Acts chapter 4, verse 36, and Acts chapter 15, verse 36 through 41. From these numerous references, we can understand how the Gospels were written accurately by so many different writers contributing to the larger work to complete each ethnic gospel. In John chapter 3, verses 1 through 21. And in John chapter 7, verses 50 through 51. In John chapter 19, verses 39 through 42. Nicodemus was a Pharisee and a member of the elite Sanhedrin specialists. Joseph of Arimathea was likewise a fellow member with Nick. Both scholars had advanced skills and soon became part of an increasingly larger group of diverse personalities documenting the testimonies of the vast number of eyewitnesses to Jesus' miracles and teachings. Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Zacchaeus, the chief tax collector, was chosen by Jesus because he demonstrated exceptionally strong messianic interest in Jesus, and he had exceptional documentation skills. The numerous writers of the Gospels had great difficulty trying to keep up with the vast number of miraculous healings performed by Jesus. Numerous summarized miracles of Jesus Christ. Matthew chapter 8, verses 16. Matthew chapter 14, verse 35 through 36. Matthew chapter 15, verses 30 through 31. Mark chapter 1, verses 32 through 34. Mark chapter 3, verses 10 through 11. And Mark chapter 6, verse 13. Luke chapter 4, verses 40 through 41. Luke chapter 7, verse 21. John chapter 2, verse 23. John chapter 20, verse 30 through 31. John chapter 21, verse 25. And the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1, verse 3. This is the beginning of how the Gospels were written and assembled and preserved. To be continued. Jesus Christ thinks you are extremely valuable, and so do I.